It was a Wednesday night like any other, broadcasting across millions of screens in American households. Freedom Focus was about to go on air. To many, it was just another nightly political talk show where guests engaged in heated exchanges through probing questions. Yet for those who closely followed political developments, they knew that tonight would be different. At the helm of the show was Jay Carver, a familiar face on television for over 2 decades, renowned for his blunt style and uncompromising questions. He wasn't merely the host, he was a symbol of steadfast determination in holding politicians accountable. Tonight, he was set to face one of America's most captivating young figures, Barron Trump. Despite being only 18, Barron had quickly captured the public's attention, not only because of his title as the president's son, but also due to his intelligent remarks and keen insights. He brought with him a fresh, youthful breeze, brimming with passion, compelling anyone who heard him speak to pause and listen. The topic for the evening was, "Is the media truly fair?" A question that sounded simple, yet concealed layers of contradictions and divisions within society. An experienced host versus a rising young star. Who would speak up and who would be challenged? Backstage, the atmosphere was tense as the production team completed their final checks. The cameras were ready, the stage lights blazed to life, and the program's signature opening tune signaled the start of a dramatic night of debate. No one could have foreseen that, within minutes, the audience would witness one of the most explosive moments in live television history. The studio lights gleamed brilliantly off the sleek glass table that divided the space between the 2 central figures. The camera smoothly panned across every expression, every subtle change in their eyes. Outside, the atmosphere remained calm, but inside, tension mounted with each passing second. Viewers at home wondered whether this was just another routine political debate, or if it was about to erupt into a fiercely competitive showdown. Jay Carver offered a slight smile, exuding the confidence of a seasoned host. He began, "Barron, thank you for joining us tonight. Our audience is eagerly waiting to hear your perspective on a hot topic. Is the media truly objective?" Beryl responded in a steady yet impassioned tone. "Thank you, Jay. I look forward to an open and honest dialogue. In this era where information travels at lightning speed, we need to consider issues from multiple perspectives." Jay nodded, his eyes challenging as he continued. "You're right. The news does move as fast as lightning. But that also forces us to ask, is the news delivered fairly, or is it manipulated to serve private interests?" Without hesitation, Barron's eyes lit up as he replied, "I believe the media should serve as a mirror reflecting the truth, neutral and objective. But the reality is that some stories are thrust to the forefront, while crucial events are left forgotten, even though their importance is equal." Jay pursed his lips in a challenging smile. "So you're suggesting there's a systemic bias in how news is selected, Barron?" Barron answered slowly, his gaze serious. "If there were no bias, then why do some stories only receive attention when they are entertaining or controversial, while significant political events are downplayed or hidden?" Jay seemed eager to press further. "Can you give a specific example to illustrate your point?" Barron took a deep breath, then replied with youthful confidence, tempered by sharp insight. "Imagine a scenario where an important policy issue is ignored by the mainstream networks, while a minor incident is blown up into hot news every single week. Does that really reflect fairness for all events?" But here lies the difference. The mainstream media, those networks with vast reach and immense influence, claim neutrality while secretly pushing an agenda, and that very fact has eroded public trust. Jay Carver pressed his lips together gently. Barron Trump, the rising star propelled into the spotlight by his father, Donald Trump's resounding presidential victory, had struck at the very heart of one of modern journalism's greatest criticisms, the ever-increasing loss of trust in mainstream media. He glanced at the production crew. No one spoke, yet the weight of the moment was palpable. Turning his attention back to Barron, Jay exhaled slowly and smiled. "It seems you're very confident in your stance, but let me ask, do you think that conservative factions also contribute to this erosion of trust by constantly insisting they are treated unfairly?" Barron's eyes remained steady. I believe that when a problem exists, speaking out is not merely complaining, it is a responsibility. A moment of silence passed between them, then Jay chuckled softly, his voice now less confident than before. All right, Barron. If you're ready for a frank and honest debate, then I won't hold anything back. Those words were delivered gently, yet their message was unmistakable. The gloves had been thrown off. Jay was no longer merely the moderator, he was challenging, and Barron fully understood what that meant. The debate had just entered an entirely new level. The atmosphere in the studio shifted, evolving from a traditional dialogue into a fierce intellectual battle. Both men held steadfastly to their views, but their tones grew increasingly tense. Jay Carver, despite his many years of experience, began to feel the pressure, as Barron's resolute and incisive answers challenged his control. He was no longer in command of the conversation, he was being counterattacked, and Jay was not one to take such an encirclement lightly. He pressed his hands tightly on the table, lowering his voice slightly, creating an intimate illusion. Barron, you say that mainstream media is no longer trustworthy, that they manipulate information, but have you ever considered that conservative outlets do the same? They have their own foundations, their own news channels, their own independent stories. Do you think you're criticizing a system in which, to some extent, the very factions you support are also at fault for contributing to that erosion? Barron tilted his head slightly, his sharp gaze fixed on Jay. I have never claimed that conservative outlets are free from bias, but the real question is, Jay, where does the difference lie? Conservative channels do not hide their viewpoints, they openly express their stance, whereas mainstream media proclaims itself to be the storyteller of objective truth. But is that really true, as they claim? Jay raised his eyebrows, as if he had been waiting for that answer. So, you mean to say that all mainstream media channels carry a fixed political agenda? Barron smiled, his eyes radiating understanding. I don't need to spell out everything, Jay. Just look at the way the news is presented, the meticulously chosen headlines, the carefully arranged images, the stories that are highlighted while the crucial events are buried. All are deliberate. Jay slammed his hand on the table, his voice now carrying extra weight. But Barron, aren't conservative outlets doing exactly the same? They have their own news channels, their own headlines, and their own stories. Isn't the real issue not whether it's mainstream or conservative media, but the fact that everyone only seeks information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs? Barron replied, his steady voice unruffled. There is one major difference. Conservative media, even if biased, does not control the entire system. Mainstream media is different. They dictate what millions of Americans hear, see, and believe every day. Jay's face hardened slightly. So, by your account, are you suggesting that the conservatives are merely playing the victim? That was no longer just a question. It was an accusation laden with implication. Are conservatives simply playing the victim? Barron nodded slowly, his expression calm yet resolute. I'm not saying that we are the victims. I'm merely stating that there exists a system that controls information, shapes narratives, and punishes anyone who dares to challenge it. Jay let out a dry laugh, but the warmth from before had long since evaporated. Are you describing a conspiracy? Barron didn't bat an eye. Not a conspiracy, just the reality. A heavy silence fell over the control room. A member of the production team furrowed his brow, glancing at his colleague. The discussion was escalating faster than anticipated, yet Jay was not about to back down. He leaned forward, his voice laced with sarcasm. You know, Barron, perhaps the issue isn't just media bias, but that conservatives like you simply cannot accept the truth when it doesn't serve your interests. Immediately, the energy in the room changed. It was no longer a debate, but a direct confrontation. Barron let those words hang in the air for a moment. Then, instead of reacting impulsively, he calmly placed both hands on the table, his eyes never leaving Jay's. Are you saying that we cannot accept the truth, or that we refuse to accept a version of the truth dictated by the media? Jay frowned, clearly displeased with how easily Barron had redirected the conversation. I'm saying that if you and those like you truly believe in transparency, Perhaps you should question the conservative channels you support, just as you question the mainstream networks. Barron tilted his head, his expression hinting at discontent, yet his eyes remained sharp. And if you truly believe in transparency, perhaps you should start by questioning your own network from the very beginning. Jay hesitated. No one moved, no one spoke in that moment. The boundary between host and guest was gradually vanishing. This was no longer an interview, it was a battle, and Jay knew he couldn't afford to lose in front of millions of viewers. So, he decided to push the conversation further. A single statement, one moment, and that would become the biggest mistake of his career. Tension in the studio grew thick, oppressive, and heavy. Within minutes, the debate had shifted from an exchange of viewpoints to a direct showdown. Barron remained calm and composed, while Jay Carver began to unravel. He leaned forward, his voice growing sharper. "Barron, be honest. You and those like you always talk about media bias, about conservatives being treated unfairly, but tell me, who truly controls the narrative? Who really holds the power here?" Barron did not rush to answer. He held Jay's challenging gaze, sharp and unyielding. "People like us." Jay hesitated for a moment, realizing he had gone too far, but instead of retreating, he pressed on. "I understand your point, Barron. Conservatives, those who constantly complain about being silenced, are, in fact, the ones who shape their own narratives." Barron didn't flinch. He let Jay's words resonate in the air, allowing their weight to fill the room. "Would you care to clarify what you mean?" Jay crossed his fingers, trying to maintain control, but his tense posture spoke volumes. Both the audience and the production crew behind the cameras could sense that he was losing his grip on the conversation, and that made him increasingly agitated. "What I'm saying is that conservatives are merely pretending to be victims, while in reality they construct their image as the oppressed to shirk responsibility." The studio fell into a chilling silence. In the control room, a team member clutched his clipboard tightly, his eyes fixed on the screen as the entire crew exchanged worried glances. Everyone could feel that the discussion was descending into dangerous territory. Barron tilted his head slightly, as if weighing his next move, but instead of retaliating immediately, he let Jay's words echo, knowing that sometimes silence is the strongest weapon. Finally, he spoke softly yet purposefully. "Are you trying to say that conservatives contribute nothing to society?" Jay narrowed his eyes. This was not the direction he had intended for the conversation. "I mean, if that's what you're saying, then—" Barron interjected calmly. "Because if that's what you intend to say, then you are not only insulting me, but also millions of hard-working Americans, people of faith, believers in traditional values, taxpayers, builders, servants, and defenders of this country every single day." The audience held its breath. The debate was no longer merely about media. It had transformed into a confrontation over identity, values, and the very meaning of being American. Jay realized he had pushed too far. He should have cooled down, but instead he was digging his own grave even deeper. Perhaps if conservatives spent less time complaining about oppression and more time actually contributing to society, we wouldn't have to have this conversation. Jay's words exploded in the control room like a bomb, leaving a question hanging in the tense atmosphere. The executive producer abruptly turned to his assistant, his voice booming like thunder. "Did he just say that?" The assistant said nothing, standing silently with his eyes glued to the screen as Barron Trump remained seated, unmoved. He was silent, but his eyes brimmed with determination, as if to prove that he didn't need to respond to Jay Carver's words. Then he asked once more, his voice unwavering, "Do you want to repeat that?" Jay sighed, his face suddenly flushing red with alarm, but it was too late. The cameras kept rolling, millions of eyes were fixed on him, and the internet, the place where every word lives forever, had recorded every trace. "I mean, if the conservatives would stop clinging to the idea that they are silenced, maybe they would truly have influence in society." Barron nodded, as if every word had been etched deep into his mind. Then he spoke up, cold and sharp. "So, Jay, Who is the one that really decides who gets to speak? Jay fell silent, his eyes full of confusion, as if he could not find a response, and in that very moment, everything changed. Within minutes, the clip of their exchange exploded, spreading like wildfire over dry grass. The phrase, "maybe if the Conservatives spent less time complaining and more time contributing," was cut out, ripped from its original context, and became the haunting headline of that night. In the control room, the lights dimmed as the executive producer brushed his hand across his face, his voice trembling slightly. "This will never stop." Barron needed no further words. He simply tilted his head slightly, clasped his hands together as if embracing the truth itself, letting silence speak in place of all words. Meanwhile, Jay Carver remained in a daze, unaware that that very moment had already destroyed his career. Just minutes after the Freedom Focus program ended, a storm of reactions erupted on social media. A short clip, only a few seconds long, was broadcast like a massive tidal wave, a moment of lost control, a rebellious phrase. And now Jay Carver's words no longer belonged to him. They had become an internet battleground, dissected, debated, and unforgiven. Every platform exploded with sensational headlines. Jay Carver. Maybe if the Conservatives spent less time complaining and more time contributing. Does Jay Carver really believe that the Conservatives don't contribute? Television shock. Can Jay Carver withstand the wave of criticism? The criticisms poured in relentlessly, like a raging storm. "I can't believe a television host would blurt that out live. It's absolutely shameful." Jay Carver has finally shown the world his true nature. Is this the exemplar of mainstream media? If someone said that about any other group, they'd be fired immediately. But Jay Carver, he gets a pass. However, not everyone agreed with the onslaught of criticism. A countercurrent of opinions emerged, forcing people to reflect. We are ruining a man's career over a single statement. Jay Carver has served in journalism for decades. Is one mistake enough to erase his entire career? But what plunged everything into darkness was not just the wave of outrage, but also the way the clip was edited. Maliciously cropped and altered on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Twitter. Multiple versions of the video continuously appeared, stripped of their original context, retaining only the phrase, "maybe if the Conservatives spent less time complaining." Like a knife thrust into the heart of the public, with no balance to soften the shock. With each circulation, the storm grew ever more furious. Then the sponsors began to intervene. The first advertiser to speak, his voice cold and detached, declared, "We are committed to equality and respect in media. Therefore, we are suspending all advertising on Freedom Focus until further notice." Within just a few hours, 4 other major sponsors followed suit. In the network's headquarters, panic erupted like a deluge. Executives hurriedly convened emergency meetings, phones rang incessantly, emails were sent at lightning speed. What had started as a tense debate had now transformed into a complete PR disaster. In the dim corner of the office, a junior communications officer stared fixedly at his phone, his heart pounding as notifications kept pouring in. A message from a senior executive appeared, like a dark omen. "We cannot keep Jay Carver if this situation isn't controlled. Prepare a contingency plan immediately." Meanwhile, Barron Trump remained silent. He did not seek attention, did not go on air to counter or express his opinions. He simply retweeted the viral clip, accompanied by a thoughtful emoji. That was enough to ignite yet another storm on the internet. Now, the issue was no longer just about Jay Carver. It had become a fierce debate over free speech, the power of the media, and whether a single mistake could destroy an entire career. In the shadow of the ever-widening crisis, one question haunted everyone. Will they protect Jay Carver, or will they sacrifice him to save the brand? At the heart of the network, tension spread through every corridor. Emergency meetings were held continuously, phones rang non-stop, and executives monitored real-time viewer statistics. As audience numbers dropped minute by minute, public reaction grew increasingly fierce. By the next morning, the situation had only worsened. Major media outlets, from conservative networks to neutral and left-leaning newspapers, repeatedly asked, "Has Jay Carver gone too far? How will the network handle this crisis? Who really holds the power in this media storm?" But it was the sponsors who truly rocked the network. Initially, they merely suspended ads, stating they were monitoring the situation. But after just one night, 3 major corporations announced their complete withdrawal. One major media conglomerate declared, in a cold tone, "We have always supported respect and neutrality in journalism. In light of recent events, we can no longer continue our partnership with Freedom Focus." Another sponsor also spoke out. "We cannot support a program where the host makes divisive and incendiary remarks." These statements were not merely damage control measures, they were a death sentence for Jay Carver. And now the network faced its final decision. Would they protect Jay Carver, or would they sacrifice him to save the brand? At 10 a.m., an emergency meeting was convened on the top floor of the building. An executive, slamming his hand on the table as if to extinguish the storm, shouted, "We can't keep Jay Carver any longer. Sponsors are pulling out, the audience is turning their backs, and if we don't act now, the show will be over." A different executive then, who had worked with Carver for 15 years, spoke in a trembling voice. "He's been with us for decades. How can we just discard him because of one mistake?" But no sympathy was heard. A PR director, his voice as cold as ice, declared, "That mistake has turned into a PR disaster. He is no longer our asset. He is a liability." Silence fell, and then a bloody decision was made. Jay Carver would be fired. At 3 p.m., the network posted an official statement on its website. "After reviewing recent events, we have decided to part ways with Jay Carver. We thank him for his years of service and wish him all the best in the future." There was no apology, no justification, just a ruthless farewell aimed at severing all ties with Jay Carver. The news spread, and public reaction split into 2 camps. But a television host cannot say such things without facing consequences. This is a warning to anyone who thinks they can say whatever they want. Cancel culture is in full swing. A man loses his entire career over one statement. What about free speech? Meanwhile, Jay Carver, the man who once dominated the airwaves, had now been erased from all memory. That evening, reporters swarmed his house, eager for an explanation, but he vanished into the darkness, offering no apology, no explanation. Instead, amid the wreckage, he quietly began planning his next move. As for Barron Trump, he still stood there, silent yet unafraid. He did not celebrate, did not revel, he simply returned to his work. But after that night, he was no longer just a rising star known as the president's son. He had become a symbol of decisiveness and authenticity. The Jay Carver scandal not only destroyed a career, but it also served as a wake-up call for the entire media industry, a message that could not be ignored. No one, even those once seen as pillars of credibility, can escape the price of their words. But this story is not over, for when a man like Jay Carver loses everything, he not only disappears, but also strikes back forcefully, launching a new program in the battle between the media and the public. 3 days after Jay Carver was fired, the storm of controversy still raged. Television experts exploded into heated debates, each offering their own perspective. Some praised the network's decision as a necessary step to demand transparency and accountability in journalism, while others warned that this was a dangerous precedent, proof that anyone, no matter how powerful, could be destroyed by a single careless remark. Regardless, there was no denying that Jay Carver's career on mainstream television was officially over. But his story was only just beginning. On Monday morning, an unexpected tweet went viral from Jay Carver's official account. Truth cannot be silenced. This is only the beginning. Below the tweet was a link to a new website. Those who clicked the link would witness a raw video, devoid of the glitz of a studio, lacking any grand backdrop. Just Jay Carver sitting alone in his home office, his eyes resolute and his deep, warm voice resonating. I lost my job because of one remark. But this isn't just about me. It's about the real power behind the puppets of the media, who holds the narrative, who decides who gets to speak and who must be silenced. If I can be swept away by a storm over one statement, then anyone can. He paused, looking straight into the camera with a defiant glare. But I will not be discouraged. I will reveal what they will never let you know, and I will do it my way. That declaration marked the launch of the Carver Report, an independent news platform helmed by Jay Carver, free from the influence of the giant media conglomerates. Within just a few hours, the new website attracted hundreds of thousands of visits, igniting a passionate community eager to break free from the domination of corporate journalism. While public opinion remained tumultuous over Carver's downfall, Barron Trump, the rising star propelled by his father Donald Trump's resounding victory, had consolidated his power in a completely different way. Without the need for grandiose speeches or flashy interviews, every time he appeared on television, every word from Barron exuded calm, natural magnetism, and an undeniable air of authority. He was not merely an emerging figure. He had become the emblem of the younger generation, standing firm against the onslaught of the media and causing his opponents to collapse under their own weight. His silence, with each carefully chosen word, resonated with tremendous influence. One traditional media empire had fallen, but a new one was forming. Jay Carver's story was not just about a man losing his job. It was a testament to the profound shift in how power is shaped in the media, the voice of the public in deciding who gets heard. Yet the big question remained: can Jay Carver reinvent himself and reclaim his position, or is this merely a desperate attempt to fight against an unrelenting backlash? Can Barron Trump, with his fresh influence, cement his status in this new era? And most importantly, does this signal the beginning of the end for an age when media conglomerates controlled information? One thing is certain: this battle is far from over. It has only just begun. We have witnessed the transformation from a simple television dialogue through a career-ending mistake to now, where new, powerful figures are emerging, demanding transparency and accountability in news delivery. We live in an era where a single remark can destroy an entire career. A moment can be cut, distorted, and spread at the speed of light, shaking even the mightiest figures under the fury of public outrage. But is this justice? Or are we merely passive spectators in an endless arena, cheering as one falls and forgetting them when the next scandal erupts? The truth is, the media no longer belongs to a select few. The power now lies in your hands, in our hands. We decide who gets to speak and who must be silenced. However, that power comes with a huge responsibility. If we only share sensational headlines without understanding the full context, if we only like and support stories that confirm our personal beliefs while ignoring the truth, are we really any different from those we criticize for manipulating information? He did not just vanish, he rose up and fought back. And that was the beginning of a new battle between the media and the public. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.